The Supreme Court chamber was so quiet you could hear someone breathe. The lights were bright, sharp, almost too white. At the center of it all stood Jasmine Crockett, her red suit glowing against the sea of dark robes. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters sat frozen, waiting for something to happen. Then it did. "Congresswoman." "That's enough," Chief Justice John Roberts said, his voice echoing through the marble room like a command. For a moment, time stopped. Jasmine didn't move. She didn't blink. She looked right at him, steady, calm, fearless. In that single second, every person in that chamber felt it. Something historic was about to unfold. She had been invited as a friend of the court to speak on a case that most people thought would be quiet and technical. Williams v. Texas Election Commission. But this wasn't quiet anymore. This was about who really holds power in America, the court or the people. Jasmine Crockett took a breath and stepped closer to the podium. "With all due respect, Mr. Chief Justice, the Constitution doesn't give you permission to silence an elected representative speaking about voting rights." The room gasped. You could feel hearts beating faster. Roberts blinked once, caught off guard. No one, not a lawyer, not a senator, not even another justice, had ever talked to him like that in open court. Jasmine's voice didn't shake. "I represent 750,000 Americans, and they sent me here to speak for them." Cameras zoomed in. You could see the veins in Roberts's hand tighten on the gavel. This wasn't supposed to happen. Earlier that morning, the courtroom had looked ordinary. Polished wood, the smell of old books, clerks whispering. Chief Justice Roberts had greeted everyone with the same polite smile he'd used for 18 years. He liked control. He liked order. But Jasmine Crockett was not a woman who followed scripts. When the clerk announced her name, "The Honorable Court recognizes Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett." Appearing as friend of the court, the audience leaned forward. A few people whispered, "That's her." The one from Texas. She walked up slowly, shoulders straight, her red jacket bright as a flame. "Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice. May it please the court," she began. Her voice was rich and steady. "I stand here today not just as a congresswoman, but as someone who has watched entire communities lose their voice." She paused, looking at each justice. "The case before you isn't about paperwork or procedure. It's about whether we still believe every citizen deserves a fair chance to vote." Her words landed hard. You could see it on the faces of people sitting in the gallery. Veterans, teachers, pastors, even college kids. They weren't just watching a hearing. They were witnessing history. Chief Justice Roberts leaned forward. "Congresswoman, please stick to the legal issues before the court." His tone was cold, polite, but it carried warning. Jasmine smiled faintly. "Yes, Your Honor. The legal issue is discrimination, and discrimination doesn't hide behind fancy language. It lives in laws that look fair on paper but crush people in practice." You could feel the tension tighten like a string, she continued. "In Texas, 23% of Black Texans don't have the specific ID this law demands. For white Texans, that number is under 5%. That's not equal protection. That's not democracy. That's a poll tax by another name." Gasps rippled through the room. Roberts's eyes narrowed. "Congresswoman, please avoid emotional arguments." Jasmine turned to him unflinching. "Emotion? Mr. Chief Justice, the Constitution itself was written from emotion. The anger of people who were denied rights. The courage of people who demanded equality." The audience went still. For a second, even the justices looked shaken. Justice Kagan glanced at Justice Jackson. Justice Thomas sat completely still. Justice Barrett scribbled something quickly on her notepad. Jasmine took another breath and held up a sheet of paper. "Here's what emotion looks like in numbers. 87-year-old veterans who fought for this country can't vote anymore because their birth certificates don't match their Social Security cards. Elderly women turned away because they were born at home and never had state records. Disabled men told to drive to another county for an ID because their local DMV has no wheelchair access." She looked straight at Roberts. "This is not theory. This is America right now." You could hear a pin drop. Roberts shifted in his seat. He didn't like where this was going. He wanted the argument back in legal language, the kind that kept emotion locked away. Congresswoman, the court must focus on constitutional standards, not individual stories. Then let's do that, Jasmine said. She reached into her folder and pulled out a small, worn booklet, the U.S. Constitution. I'd like to start with this document. Your Honor. A wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. Roberts's eyes hardened. This is not a political rally, Congresswoman. She didn't blink. No, sir. It's a constitutional one. That line would be quoted on television for weeks. She flipped open the booklet. The 15th Amendment says the right to vote shall not be denied or limited by race. The 14th says all citizens must be treated equally under the law. That's not interpretation. That's text. That's America's promise. Her words hit like a drumbeat. Justice Jackson nodded slightly. Justice Sotomayor leaned forward. The audience could sense the power shift. The courtroom wasn't under Roberts's control anymore. It was under hers. Every camera light glared. You could almost feel the heat on Jasmine's face. Roberts lifted his chin. Congresswoman Crockett, you are out of time. She stayed perfectly still. Mr. Chief Justice, she said slowly, you may control the clock in this courtroom. But you don't control the Constitution. The words sliced through the air. For one long, electric second, no one breathed. Even Roberts looked frozen, unsure how to answer. The gavel in his hand didn't move. Jasmine lowered her papers. You can cut my microphone if you wish, but the truth doesn't need permission to be spoken. A few people in the audience clapped before security hushed them. Reporters typed frantically. One of them whispered, "This is going to be everywhere by tonight." And they were right. Outside the courthouse, crowds had gathered to watch the hearing on big screens. People stood shoulder to shoulder, holding flags and signs that read, "Let us vote," and "The Constitution belongs to us too." Every word Jasmine spoke echoed through the speakers. When Roberts tried to interrupt, boos rose from the street. When Jasmine stood her ground, cheers followed. For the first time in years, ordinary Americans felt like someone was finally saying what they had been shouting into the void, that the right to vote should not depend on skin color, zip code, or convenience. Back inside, Roberts cleared his throat. Order. Order in the court. Jasmine lowered the Constitution to the podium and looked up at him again. Mr. Chief Justice, she said softly, the people outside aren't chanting for me. They're chanting for the right that gives every other right meaning. You can call it emotion. I call it the heartbeat of this nation. Silence again. Every justice sat still, as if carved from stone. Even Roberts looked smaller now. His authority dimmed by something larger. Truth. And then, almost too quietly to hear, he said, Congresswoman Crockett, this court will take your words under advisement. It sounded formal, but everyone in that room knew something had shifted forever. When Jasmine stepped out of the courtroom that afternoon, sunlight hit her face like victory. Microphones and cameras surrounded her instantly. Congresswoman, were you afraid to confront the Chief Justice? She smiled. Fear doesn't protect democracy. Courage does. Reporters shouted more questions. Crowds chanted her name. Behind her, the Supreme Court stood tall, the symbol of justice. But for once, it was the voice of a woman in red that carried farther than the marble walls. She looked straight at the cameras. The Constitution belongs to every American, and no one, not even a Chief Justice, can silence that truth. The crowd erupted in cheers, and just as she turned to leave, a staffer rushed up beside her holding a phone. Congresswoman, he said breathlessly. The White House just called. The president wants to speak to you. Right now. Jasmine froze. The noise of the crowd faded behind her. The cameras zoomed in on her face. Calm, but her eyes lit with something new. Tell him, she said slowly. I'm listening. The screen faded to black. The words left Jasmine's lips calm and sure, but her pulse hammered in her chest. The air outside the Supreme Court still vibrated with chants. Reporters crowded forward, microphones flashing. Her aide cupped a phone to her ear. It's the president's chief of staff. he whispered. "They want you on the line now." Jasmine nodded once, stepping toward the black SUV waiting at the curb. Cameras followed. Every lens caught the look on her face, focused, unafraid, carrying the weight of what had just happened inside. She climbed into the back seat, closed the door, and the noise outside muffled. The call connected. "Congresswoman Crockett?" "Yes, sir." The president was watching. "He'd like to meet tonight." A pause. She looked out the tinted window at the marble columns disappearing behind her. Tonight works. The car pulled away from the court, rolling past crowds still chanting her name. People waved flags and cell phones, shouting, "We saw you stand up, and you told him the truth." She smiled faintly, humbled, but she knew the storm was only beginning. Inside, her staff scrolled through notifications. Millions of views already. The clip of her holding up the Constitution had gone viral before she even reached Constitution Avenue. Her communications director turned around. "Ma'am, CNN wants you live at 7. MSNBC too. Fox is calling it a meltdown in the court. Do we respond?" Jasmine shook her head. "Not yet. Let them talk. We'll answer once the people have." She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. Images replayed in her mind. The marble floors, Roberts's sharp tone, her own words cutting through centuries of silence. The SUV reached the White House gates just after sunset. Washington's sky was streaked orange and violet, the monument glowing in the distance. Secret Service agents checked IDs, their expressions tight but curious. Everyone had seen the clip. Inside the West Wing, the halls buzzed. Staffers whispered as she passed. "That's her, the congresswoman who challenged the Chief Justice." She was guided into the Roosevelt room. The president stood by the fireplace, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, eyes thoughtful. He extended a hand. "Congresswoman Crockett. Quite a day." "Mr. President," she replied, shaking his hand firmly. He gestured for her to sit. "You understand you've started something. The country's watching." "I didn't plan to start a fight," she said softly. "But if standing up for the Constitution looks like one, then maybe the fight was overdue." The president nodded slowly. "I agree." He leaned forward. "We're reviewing a new federal voting rights proposal. After today, your voice carries weight. I want you helping shape it." Her eyes widened slightly. "You mean lead it?" He smiled faintly. "Let's just say, be its soul." Hours later, back at her apartment overlooking the Capitol dome, Jasmine sat alone by the window, laptop open. News anchors debated her every word. Some praised her courage. Others called it grandstanding. She wasn't listening to any of it. She was watching the replay. Again. The moment Roberts told her to stop. The moment she refused. Her phone buzzed, with messages from friends and strangers. "My grandmother cried watching you. You gave us back hope. Texas needed this." She typed a short post. When truth speaks, it doesn't need permission. Within minutes, it had thousands of shares. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the National Mall. A gentle breeze carried the smell of coffee and wet grass. Jasmine walked briskly into the Capitol for a scheduled hearing. Reporters lined the steps. "Congresswoman, do you regret challenging Chief Justice Roberts?" one shouted. She stopped briefly, meeting their eyes. "I regret that it had to happen. But I'll never regret standing up for voters who've been ignored." Clicks, flashes, shouts. She walked inside. In the hallway, her colleague Representative Marquez caught up with her. "You realize you've made half of Washington nervous?" "Only half?" she said with a small grin. He laughed, but his tone turned serious. "The court doesn't forget challenges like that. They'll push back." "I know," she said. "That's why we push harder." Later that week, Jasmine sat in a House committee room filled with folders and coffee cups. Drafts of the new bill, the Freedom to Vote Restoration Act, covered the table. She ran her hand across the pages. "This can't just be paper," she told her staff. "It has to be something people feel in their lives. Easier registration, longer early voting, federal ID alternatives, real teeth for enforcement." Her legislative aide nodded. "The president's team agrees, but the opposition's already planning amendments to gut it." Jasmine smiled slightly. "Then we'll make sure the people know exactly who's trying to stop them from voting." By nightfall, news broke that the Chief Justice had requested a rare televised address at Georgetown Law. The topic: judicial boundaries and public confidence. Every network hinted it was a response to Crockett. When Jasmine saw the headline, she felt that same spark of determination flare up. "If he's going public," she said, "so will we." She dialed her communications director. "Book the National Press Club for tomorrow evening. I'll deliver a statement on voting rights and the separation of powers." Her aide hesitated. "That'll dominate headlines for days." "Exactly," Jasmine said. "Let's make sure truth keeps the microphone." The next evening, cameras packed the press club. The room buzzed. Ordinary citizens mixed with senators, activists, and retired judges. Jasmine stepped onto the stage in another bright red suit, the same color she'd worn in the court. She looked out over the crowd. "Yesterday," she began, "I was told to stop speaking. Today, I'm here to say I won't." Applause thundered. "Our Constitution gives power to 3 branches," she continued, "but its heart beats in one place, among the people. When any branch forgets that, it's our duty to remind them." Her voice softened. "Voting is not a privilege to be managed. It's a promise to be kept." The audience rose to its feet. Across town, televisions in diners, barbershops, and nursing homes played her speech. Older viewers nodded. Some wiped tears. They remembered their first votes, the marches, the years when voices like theirs were silenced. Meanwhile, in his private chambers, Chief Justice Roberts watched the broadcast on mute. The reflection of Jasmine's red suit shimmered on the dark glass of his desk. He leaned back slowly, eyes thoughtful, jaw tight. He picked up the phone. "Schedule a meeting with Justice Kagan and Justice Barrett," he told his clerk. "We need to discuss the Texas case again." The clerk hesitated. "Sir, the ruling draft is complete." "Then it's time to make sure it's right," Roberts said quietly. For the first time in years, doubt shadowed his voice. 2 weeks later, the decision in Williams v. Texas Election Commission was released. The nation held its breath. By a 5-4 majority, the court struck down the restrictive ID law. The opinion cited disproportionate impact on minority voters inconsistent with the protections of the 15th Amendment. Chief Justice Roberts' name appeared among the majority. Crowds erupted outside the court. Bells rang from nearby churches. Reporters shouted, "Historic reversal!" Jasmine read the opinion from her office window, sunlight flooding the pages. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "We did it." Her staff cheered. Phones rang nonstop. Messages poured in from across the country. That evening, she appeared on national television. The interviewer asked, "Congresswoman Crockett, what do you think changed the Chief Justice's mind?" She smiled gently. "Maybe he remembered who the Constitution belongs to." "Do you consider this your victory?" She shook her head. "It's America's." But just as she began to feel the weight lift, her phone buzzed again. An encrypted call marked unknown federal source. She hesitated, then answered. A deep voice said, "Congresswoman Crockett, congratulations on the ruling. But be careful. Not everyone wanted this outcome." The line clicked dead. She froze, staring at the phone. Outside her window, the Capitol dome glowed against the night sky, beautiful and solemn. She whispered to herself, "Every victory has its shadow." Then she straightened her back. "And I'm ready for the next fight." The camera of imagination pulls back. Washington, D.C., shining under the moon. the echo of her words hanging in the air like a promise. That night, Jasmine Crockett couldn't sleep. The city outside her window pulsed with celebration, horns honking, people cheering. But deep inside, she felt an unease she couldn't name. Her phone still glowed from the last call. Unknown number. A warning whispered by someone who clearly knew too much. She poured herself a glass of water and walked to the balcony. From there, she could see the Capitol dome shining white under the moon. Somewhere inside that marble world, decisions were already being made. She could almost feel it in her bones. Power never forgave being embarrassed. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her aide, Mark. "Ma'am, you need to see this. Check your email." Jasmine opened her laptop. Headlines were spreading fast. Anonymous sources claim Congresswoman Crockett leaked private court documents to influence decision. Her heart dropped. "That's a lie," she said quietly. Mark's voice shook on the other end. "They're saying a staffer from your office sent drafts to the press weeks ago. They're calling for an ethics investigation." Jasmine straightened her back. "Then we'll give them the truth." The next morning, Washington woke up divided. On one side, people celebrated her as a hero. On the other, powerful voices called her reckless. Cable shows debated whether she had overstepped her authority. Jasmine arrived at the Capitol with cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. "Congresswoman, did you leak court information? Do you plan to resign if the charges are true?" She stopped on the steps, looked straight into the cameras and said, "No one in my office leaked anything. But I know what this really is, a distraction. When you speak truth to power, power fights back." Her words played on every channel that day. By noon, the Ethics Committee had announced a formal inquiry. Jasmine sat at her desk, calm but determined. Her staff looked shaken. "Ma'am, the evidence they have looks manufactured," said her chief of staff. "Fake email chains, altered timestamps. Someone's framing you." Jasmine nodded. "Then we trace it. Find out who did it." Her tech advisor leaned in. "We'll start with the source servers. But whoever's behind this knew what they were doing. These leaks look like they came from inside the judiciary network." She frowned. "The court itself?" He didn't answer, but his silence said everything. That night, she met quietly with an old friend, Marcus Webb, a former federal prosecutor now turned journalist. They met in a small diner away from the Capitol. Marcus slid a folder across the table. "I think you were right, Jasmine. This isn't random. I've traced a digital signature tied to a lobbying group in Texas, one that funded the same legal teams pushing voter restrictions." Jasmine opened the folder. Inside were screenshots, payment records, and an email thread linking lobbyists to a former Senate aide. Her stomach turned. "They're trying to erase everything we just won," she said. Marcus nodded. "And they'll do worse if you don't stop them first." The following week, Jasmine appeared before the Ethics Committee. The hearing room was packed. Reporters filled every corner. The chairman banged his gavel. "Congresswoman Crockett, you're accused of unauthorized disclosure of confidential judicial communications. How do you plead?" She stood tall. "I plead the truth. The documents are forgeries. This is retaliation for exposing discrimination in our voting system. And I will not be intimidated." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. Her voice stayed firm, calm. "Power should never fear accountability," she continued. "And I won't let this body be used to silence the people's voice." The chairman looked unsettled. "You'll have your chance to provide evidence." "Oh, I will," she said. "And so will you." That night, Jasmine held a press conference on the Capitol steps. The air was crisp, the lights bright. Supporters waved small flags, their faces glowing with pride and anger. She held up a thick folder. "These are real records, showing payments from political groups to those spreading false information about me. You wanted proof? Here it is." The crowd erupted. A journalist shouted, "Are you saying this reaches into the Supreme Court?" She paused for a moment, then said quietly, "I'm saying corruption wears many robes." That line hit the front page the next morning. Behind closed doors, the Chief Justice watched from his office. His expression was unreadable. He turned off the television and sat in silence. The same court that had just redeemed itself in the eyes of the nation was now being pulled into another storm. He pressed his fingertips together. "We need to protect the court's integrity," he murmured. But deep down, he knew the damage was already spreading. Weeks passed. The investigation dragged on. Jasmine continued to fight. Each morning she walked through reporters, chin high, smile steady. Each night she worked late into the quiet hours, sorting documents, building her defense. Then one evening, her aide rushed in, holding a flash drive. "We found it," he said, breathless. The original data logs. They proved the leaks came from a third-party contractor linked to the lobbying firm. Jasmine's eyes widened. "Get that to Marcus. He'll know what to do." They uploaded the files. Within hours, the story broke nationwide. Evidence clears Congresswoman Crockett. Data trail leads to corporate political network. Public outrage exploded. The same voices that once accused her now demanded answers from the powerful figures behind the smear. The ethics committee dropped all charges. Jasmine stood on the House floor as the Speaker announced her exoneration. The chamber erupted in applause, but her victory speech was simple. Truth takes time, justice takes courage, and democracy takes both. She looked across the room at her colleagues. Some clapped sincerely. Others couldn't meet her eyes. That evening, she returned to the same balcony where all this had begun. Washington's skyline stretched before her. The air was cool and still. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A calm, older voice spoke. "Congresswoman Crockett, this is Chief Justice Roberts." Jasmine froze. "Mr. Chief Justice, I wanted to speak privately," he said. "The events that followed our last encounter were regrettable. I may not agree with your methods, but I cannot deny your conviction." She listened quietly. "I have served this court for decades," he continued. "But perhaps I've forgotten that justice isn't just law, it's people." "You reminded me of that." Jasmine smiled faintly. "Then maybe we both learned something," he sighed. "Take care, Congresswoman. You'll need it. The fight never really ends." The line went silent. Weeks later, Congress passed the Freedom to Vote Restoration Act. It became one of the most significant voting rights reforms in half a century. The signing ceremony took place on the White House lawn. Jasmine stood beside the president as he lifted his pen. Cameras flashed. "This law exists," he said, because one woman refused to be silenced. Applause filled the air. Jasmine looked out over the crowd. Veterans, teachers, students, grandmothers holding their grandchildren's hands. She thought of every person who had written, called, and believed. When the president handed her the signed bill, she held it high. "This belongs to every American who's ever been told their voice doesn't matter." That night, after the celebration, she walked alone through the quiet halls of the Capitol. The marble floors gleamed under the soft lights. She stopped beneath a painting of the Constitutional Convention. "Every victory has its shadow," she whispered again. "But light always returns." A reporter waiting nearby asked softly, "Congresswoman, what's next for you?" Jasmine turned, her eyes calm but bright. "Next? Making sure this light never fades." She stepped outside into the cool night air, the Capitol dome glowing behind her like a promise fulfilled. The camera of imagination zooms out, Washington resting under the stars, the sound of her heels fading into the distance. And that was how Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stood her ground in the highest court of the land and won. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't back down. She reminded America that courage still has a place in public life, and that one person's truth can shake the walls of power. It wasn't just her. Victory. It was a victory for every grandmother who waited in line to vote, to every veteran who carried a flag home but couldn't cast a ballot. Every citizen who still believes that democracy means every voice counts. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that integrity still matters, please take a second to give this video a like. It helps more good stories reach good people. Subscribe if you haven't already, because here we share stories where justice, dignity, and truth still win in the end, and I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what part of Jasmine's stand inspired you the most? Thank you for watching, for believing, and for keeping faith in the power of doing what's right. Until next time, remember this: real power isn't about silence, it's about speaking when it matters most.